Knoxville during the 1880s, 1890s was still pretty much of a rural place. You had people coming down from the mountains looking for jobs. You had the steel mills of Lonsdale. You had a lot of textile plants over around the Park City area. It was still had a lot of rural character, a lot of rural flavor to it, and a lot of musicians, a lot of music everywhere. There were the fiddling contests on Market Square. Back then there was a great big a building called the Market House that actually had an auditorium, and folks would come from miles around to participate in these fiddling contests. Not only was it a rural place, it happened to be an urban area at the same time. So you had these two factions going on at once. You had the opera and you had fiddling contests. Very unique city, Knoxville, during that time. The St. James Hotel was part of that. The hotel itself was originally built in 1905, and it was known as the Van de Ventnor. It was touted as a modern European fireproof hotel with 150 rooms, each including its own bath, which was quite special.
Brunswick Bulk Hollander Company out of Chicago, they were primarily known for making billiard tables, but they were manufacturing a lot of different things. And in the 1910s, they got into the record manufacturing business. Now, before the Knoxville sessions of 1929, which were the first of two, there were about 120 location recordings that had already been done. And these were companies in New York and Chicago. Really, there were only three: OK, Columbia, and Victor. And what they decided is that instead of having artists come up to New York or Chicago to record, they would go out in the field and record them with portable recording equipment. And they went all over. They went over the South, the Southwest, recording a wide variety of music. And in 1927, the famous Bristol sessions happened. Victor went to Bristol, Tennessee, and recorded what became known as the Big Bang of country music. Columbia Records saw this and thought it was pretty interesting, so they went down to Johnson City to do something similar. Well, by 1928, Brunswick Vocalion had got into the field recording business, so they chose Knoxville as sort of like the next logical hillbilly or old-time music location to record in. Through the railroad, they came in with several tons of equipment. These recording apparatuses were very heavy and very expensive and difficult to move around. They set up in a radio studio that was in the mezzanine of the St. James Hotel.
A lot of furniture stores sponsored a lot of the early recording sessions to sell phonograph records. I mean, back then, that was a real piece of furniture. If you see those wind-up Victrolas, they're beautiful wood pieces, and well, you got to have records to play on these. So a lot of furniture stores started sponsoring these recording sessions. In the case of Knoxville, it was the Sturkey Brothers department store down on the 100 block of Gay Street. They really went into the business full force. They were distributors for the Vocalion record label. They put out an ad. You can still see it today in the microfilm. It says, "Come to make records." And they invited all musicians, anyone, to come to the St. James Hotel and participate in recording sessions. It was quite a big deal. It was run by a fellow by the name of Richard Voynow, who was one of the heads of Brunswick Vocalion in Chicago. And Voynow himself was a former jazz musician who played with various jazz bands during the 1920s, which may account for the different styles of music found in these sessions. Bill Brown had participated in the Columbia Johnson City sessions before, and he was great to have as a producer for these recordings. He, of course, was Atlanta-based, but he was familiar with Southerners and the South, shared the same sense of humor. He was able to draw out musicians during the recording sessions, make them feel comfortable, make them feel at home.
So Richard Voynow and Bill Brown arrived in Knoxville a few days before the sessions in August 1929 to do a little scouting and try to find some talent for these sessions. And about 25 artists were picked. The majority of the artists were from Knoxville and East Tennessee, though you did have people coming from as far away as Kentucky, from Middle Tennessee. The Knoxville acts have been people like the Tennessee Ramblers, the Rigel's Fountain Cityans, Tennessee Chocolate Drops, Leola Manning, Odessa Chancellor. From Middle Tennessee, you had the Perry County Music Makers. Uncle Dave Macon came. Uncle Jimmy Thompson came to perform as well.
Some of the early recordings by Will Bennett, sort of a mystery man. He cut two really interesting blues recordings, including one that would be a standard later, Railroad Bill.
Railroad Bill done took my wife, threatened on me that he would take my life. Now I'm gonna ride my railroad bill.
Maynard Baird and his Southern Serenaders recorded a total of 6 jazz and pop sides. They were one of Knoxville's really popular house bands. They played all over Knoxville and all over the South on tour, and at certain points played on the same bill with folks like Rudy Valley. They were that popular.
Some of these recordings have been available since the 1960s, when a lot of sort of 78 collectors were really getting into that and finding these. And then there was another sort of spurt of interest maybe once, you know, the internet came along and people were able to do more research and track this stuff down.
A lot of the recordings sort of fell through the cracks. The sessions had ill timing due to the Depression. Hence, very few people were buying records. No one could afford them. And the records themselves were pressed in very, very small numbers. Today, very few of them survive. They just didn't make it. And in certain cases, there's only one copy on the planet.
Well, and it's also really interesting that a lot of people who recorded at these sessions would continue to have careers in Knoxville and beyond after that. You know, obviously Howard Armstrong's probably the most famous person that recorded there. But a lot of these other performers also went on to perform in WNOX and radio stations around Knoxville. They would tour and travel.
Their legacy, it's a story of Knoxville. It's a story of Knoxville's community, Knoxville's musical history, our regional cultural heritage. That is the legacy of this music. It's carried on music from 85 years ago and captured it for posterity today.